Jason, do you have any interesting insights from today's conversation so far?
Well, I really took away from the conversation, Nick and Sean are both on their multi-cloud journey. So I thought maybe we could talk for a minute about how you see multi-cloud adoption affecting the practice of FinOps in public sector environments.
So there's a lot of challenges with multi-cloud in public sector, starting with a lot of federal government in particular, but also state and local doesn't get all of their cloud directly from the CSPs. They are getting them through resellers. They're getting them through their systems integrators. Add in then the challenges that we heard about earlier in a non-focused data set where the data isn't matching. So you're having your cloud come from different sources with different data formats, and now you're trying to make strategic decisions on those things. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges ahead is figuring out not how to standardize that data across clouds, but how to standardize your procurement of those clouds so that you have fewer hoops that you are jumping through to get access to your data.
Sure. I mean, you and I have been in the FinOps business for a while now as we're moving beyond just lift and shift. And as these agencies are starting to look at things like serverless and event-driven architectures and more cloud-native technologies, how do you think that's going to affect kind of the FinOps of the future?
I think it's going to have a lot of challenges on forecasting. So we heard Amanda talk about having that good data for your forecasting. Serverless is very hard to predict your costs on. An event-driven architecture, again, it's great because you're only getting charged when you need it truly to the second. But being able to predict that and build a forecast is difficult when you're talking about having to now forecast out. We're in 2024 now. We have clients forecasting 2027 and 2028. So how do you bridge that gap when you don't have a lab like Nick's where you could sit and test it for $500 over the next 90 days? So I think that that's probably going to be one of those challenges, but that data visibility feeds into so many areas of FinOps.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the other aspects that I took away from the panel was FinOps goes just way beyond just the tech, right? Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about finance, collaboration, operations. Can you maybe riff for a minute or two about the importance of bringing all those disciplines together under that FinOps umbrella?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about establishing a FinOps practice, I get asked a lot, does it belong under the CFO? Does it belong under the CIO, CTO? Where does it belong? And the answer is it belongs under all of them. But we know that that's not how structures work, and that's not actually how things get done. So it often means that you have a community of practice. We've heard about it talked from an information sharing across industry. But even within an agency, having, sometimes it's called Cloud Center of Excellence, but having that FinOps lens on it there so that you're pulling in your stakeholders who have inputs and values that matter to that conversation, I think is a huge part of getting that together. I also think it's really important that that they take the time to understand who is a stakeholder in developing that governance. So when you're building that path forward, having an understanding of exactly what areas your cloud touches. We've talked about finance and procurement, but it touches and your true IT, your infrastructure, but your security, your ability to follow mandates from, if you're federal, from executive orders telling you how long to retain your logs.
Lots of different regimes out there dictating, what, how long, how much, how many.
If any. Some entities are having to figure it out on their own and trying to set their own standards, and then that's a challenge where FinOps can bring in some of those industry best standards, best practices into the conversation. Awesome. So I know that we're going to hear in a few minutes from the cloud providers talking about how they are able to support and help our government clients and really industry clients as well talk about how they can support FinOps or how they see FinOps developing in the public sector. But one thing I would love to hear everyone talk more about is how every change we make to the cloud cost is an impact on the taxpayer dollar. And one of the things I think happens a lot when we're talking in public sector is the numbers are so big, they're hard to conceptualize. It is hard to talk about, oh, I saved $100,000 on what did Nick say, $10 million a month bill? But I would love for us to find ways to bring unit cost economics where we start talking about the smaller units of metrics. This application costs us $3 per military member served. Things that really bring home those dollars so that you can start thinking, oh, I brought this from $3 per military member served to $278. Yeah. Right? And
incremental changes at scale in these environments can really create big budget impacts that you can leverage to do things like transform the UX UI, affect the citizen experience.
Yeah, and just make the numbers more real. Most of us don't think of $10 million being a rounding error, but for a lot of our government agencies, that's true. So how do you make the impact of those FinOps initiatives more relatable and get people to invest in them? So Jason, as we wrap up here, anything else you wanted to highlight that we heard earlier today?
Yeah, I think it's great to hear a lot of the same themes from these customers, and knowing that not every client is sort of unique, right? And we're seeing these same challenges, because that gives those of us in the community an opportunity to solve multiple problems for multiple clients at the same time. Yeah,
for sure. Every example we heard today, whether it was a state university like Christopher Newport University or an NIH research institute, they were the same. They were just slightly different scales. Yeah. But the challenges of negotiating through procurement cycles and scale are the same. With that, I think that wraps up our little mid-check-in chat. I think next up we have Chris Ostergaard and our panel for our cloud service providers today.